The global economy is on a path to destruction. In 2008, there was a major financial crisis. World leaders gathered together to restore the issues that were presented. The solution was to repackage the debt and push the crisis further into the future. They've tried to cover up the problems, but it has only exacerbated this issue. Now, we must deal with the consequences of foolishness. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at the global economy. I want to show you what has happened with debt. I'm going to get into the markets first to give you an idea of what has happened. First, oil. U.S. crude oil hits lowest level since December as record-breaking losing streak continues. I've been covering this over the last several days, showing you here that now U.S. crude oil dipping below $57 a barrel. It's the lowest level since mid-December. This has been up and down. Obviously, oil is a very volatile commodity, but it is absolutely critical. So we always need to keep our eyes on it, and you can see what has happened just through October into November. It has been slipping further and further down. Now, that should be a signal to everybody what's going on in the economy, what's happening with copper prices, what's happening with other industrial metals. Follow all of these to understand what's happening, to get away from all of that political nonsense that covers up the truth. There's more details in here. I want to move on to look at the markets. As I record this video in the middle of the day, we can see that it has been up and down. It's right now showing us the Dow Jones down just a little bit. The Nasdaq and the S&P are up just a little bit as well. Friday and Monday were not very good for these trading sessions, but we're going to see where this goes, and we'll see if the rest of the week turns out to be positive. I just wanted to give you an idea of what's happening because I've been tracking it. Now we get into the issues that are so critical to understand, and I wanted to make a couple points with this. There's a few charts in a row to show you that in this case, Japan's GDP and the Bank of Japan's total assets are now the same. Imagine that throughout these years we have this crisis that is apparent. We've been increasing the amount of assets that central banks have owned, and it has been an emergency measure. The only problem is that emergency never finished. We have seen what has occurred with trillions upon trillions of dollars being added to the balance sheets, and that's never a good sign because you don't want central bankers to own and control everything, except some individuals seem to think that's a good thing. However, we'll look at this to decide, is this really the new strategy that whenever we have a problem, we allow central banks to come in and print up money out of thin air and buy the assets, whether it is asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, nothing-backed securities, garbage-backed securities, or any other bunch of trash that they try and sell us. The government will simply take over it, whether it is going to be in the form of the central bank printing up money, or whether it's a TARP type bailout, or whether it's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac being nationalized, trillions upon trillions added to the backs of the taxpayers. There's always one way or another that the average individual is getting screwed over. Look at what has happened here. Now I want to show you something else that's very interesting. When you look at this next one, the US GDP and the Fed's total assets, you see a big difference. Big difference here. The Fed's total assets, we're looking at about $4 trillion, and the US GDP exceeded $20 trillion. However, what about the time that the Fed was found out to have printed $16 trillion that was completely unaccounted for? 16 plus the 4 trillion, we go over 20 trillion. So think about that for a second now. When you look at what has actually happened during the financial crisis, at some point, we don't even exactly know all the details, but we do know that the Federal Reserve printed $16 trillion. That is a confirmed fact. I have done many videos about it before. A Apparently, a few people still don't know about that, but it is true. You can just search 16 trillion, the money GPS, and you'll get my videos on it. I show you, in fact, who they give the money to. I've done a video about how the Fed bailed out Canadian banks. You can search that as well. Fed bailed out Canada, the money GPS. You'll see that. Anyway, I just wanted to show you the fact that they made it look as if the GDP is so big, so strong, and the Fed's total assets is quote unquote only $4 trillion plus, and therefore the Fed or the US government is in a better situation. However, I disagree, because if you're simply willing to sweep it under the rug, it's not hidden, it's just covered up. But regardless, both of these countries here are in a disastrous scenario that cannot be covered up. That's the whole point. Central bank assets over the GDP, looking at these, whether it's Japan, Europe, the US, they've all increased their balance sheets dramatically throughout this period of time. When I like to break it down and understand what exactly is the reasoning behind this. Why would you go ahead and do something so unprecedented that you want to buy all of the ETFs in your country, all of this asset-backed nonsense of your country? You're going to buy the bonds, you're going to buy the treasuries, you're going to buy all the debt, you're going to buy the stocks, you're going to buy the corporate bonds. I mean, depends on where you look. Each of these central banks is doing something different. Some of them are become hedge funds and actually trying to gamble on the stock market, doing well so far, of course. And they have been doing so. And this has been the first time in history that they've ever gone to these lengths. And it is my opinion that the intention is to specifically own anything and everything, even the worst of the worst garbage, because you're printing it out of thin air. And then we get into these issues, a couple of charts to show you. Dollar of debt required to finance $1 of real GDP. And as the years have gone on since the 80s, basically, since they started to decrease interest rates, we've seen how this has become a problem. When you increase the amount of debt within the system, when you make it easier and easier and easier to borrow, guess what? People will, nations will, cities will, corporations will. And ultimately, you run into an impending crisis that at some point is going to smack people upside the head. Dollar of debt required to finance $1 of real GDP. Look at the red area there. We've gone into a territory of nearly $3. $3 of debt just to get $1 of real GDP. Now that is what happens when you have big government that owns and controls everything that we say and do. Why is the government involved in everything? Why is it that when I scratch my back, the government has to ask me 10 questions about why I'm doing it in this way, why I feel the need to scratch my back, who's doing it for me, is there somebody there, am I using a back scratcher, what about all the other details related to my back? And it has no reason for the government to ever be involved in that. But I know it's a silly example, but it's not too far from the truth. You go to the airport and see how much the government wants to know about you. I've been groped. I have been really, really groped at the airport, and I'm sure you have too. And I don't travel to the US very often. I've been a few times in the last couple years, and it's not very comfortable. I'll tell you that right now. And of course, they put you beside the machine to make sure that if you didn't want to go through the machine to get that radiation, trust me, you're going to be waiting beside it for 10 minutes before that oh so kind gentleman with the rubber glove comes around. Now, the economic deficit, you could see that the red area being the debt-free real GDP growth. I mean, come on, look at what we've done. Look at what we've done over these years. Have just destroyed such a huge, such a powerful economy, not just in the United States, but in many of these countries around the world that are considered developed nations, and they've been permanently ruined. The growth rates will never be the same as they once were. The only way you do it is by incredible deficit spending and having central banks buying up everything, and then they will be able to control it. This is important to note. This is why I don't like big government. Most of the budget goes to, this is, by the way, for the US, Most of the budget goes towards defense, social security, and major health programs. You could see the pie chart, how it breaks it down, whether we're looking at social security, Medicare, Medicaid, safety net programs, or the interest on the debt. Interest on the debt at 6%, and this comes from, it looks like, 2016 and 2018 numbers. Well, I want to show you this and understand that big government creates big problems. Of course, there are some benefits that some people may decide that they like and so on. That's fine. What I'm trying to show you is that the amount of money that you have to spend to keep everything that you have around you is only going to increase. So when I look at this here, I think to myself, I have to pay $1. In that dollar, I've got to pay 24 cents of it to Social Security, 26 cents of it to all the Medicare, Medicaid type programs. The safety net programs, that's another 9%. Okay, between that, we're looking at 60% right there. Then interest on the debt, which doesn't even make sense to begin with, that's another 6%. How much money am I actually left with as real disposable income that, in a way, I don't even want to spend it because I got to get taxed every time I go to the store to do so. And then there's, the whole issue of why are we paying so many taxes? Oh, you don't care about those who are, want their Social Security. You don't care about the people who need their Medicare and Medicaid. And that's the type of business that we have to deal with every single day. It's complete insanity the way that this system is running. Now, very quickly, just want to talk about Apple. They moved below the 200-day moving average as of this chart, which I believe is the end of the day or at the very beginning of the opening. Regardless, it did move below that 200-day moving average. Not good for a company like Apple, who supposedly could grow for eternity. They moved actually below the $1 trillion valuation in their market cap as well. This shows us that right here, the market cap moving down into the $900 billion. Obviously, it's still a massive company. There's no denying that. But this is, in fact, the quickest it has ever declined ever since the start of this company at all. Like you could see the $151 billion there in short order. So it's never done this before. And obviously, it's coming from a very, very high place. So we can see that, yes, this is much different than what we've seen in previous instances, but I'm not going to discount it. I'm going to show it for what it truly is. All right. Last but not least, we have Amazon. All right, so Amazon decides to open up 2 new headquarters. That's going to create a lot of jobs. They claim that they're going to create 50,000 jobs right now, and that would be a good thing. Obviously, for the economy, they need jobs. They're going to be able to pay them, and even if they're getting paid a wage that is not very good, at the very least, it's creating jobs that brings jobs surrounding those jobs. There's a ripple effect. There's, cars that are needed. There's transportation that is needed. There's going to be buildings that are needed. There's going to be food places that need to be around there and shopping and so on. Okay, so we have all this economy that's there, but the only problem is that New York State is kicking in more than $1.5 billion in taxpayer-funded incentives, and that's the area that I don't like. In fact, the cost per job for New York taxpayers is $48,000. So if you want Amazon to come into your state, you're going to have to pay $48,000. How does that sound? Do you want Amazon to come? Well, you decide. But regardless, I just don't like this because somebody has decided that they're going to make you pay $48,000 so that Amazon comes to your place. But what if you wanted to opt out? Could you? Of course not. And that's the whole point I'd like to make. I want to be able to opt out of everything. I want to be able to opt out of anything I choose that I desire. I don't want it. I don't want that. So I shouldn't have to pay for it. But no. They just spread it out because it's quote unquote easier when that's not really how it works. And they try to make an excuse for it, but ultimately what it is trying to take the wealth from you and put it into the hands of the few. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, you're supporting this channel, so I do appreciate that very much. Thank you. And last but not least, if you want the financial education you were not taught in the school system, then these 2 books have it all. Guess what? I wrote both of them. That's right. I'm biased, and I think these books are great. If you want to check them out, you can do so in the link in the description. You can flip through the books for yourself. If you're more interested in the audiobook version, you can get that at themoneygps.com.